In my last video, I talked a little bit about changes and sort of a slow path to making changes in capitalism so that it conforms with vegan ethics. But today I want to talk about one thing that can be done now and that Vegan Launch is doing now that has a huge impact on the practice of capitalism. So, one of the aspects of capitalism is the right to assemble capital, money, from a variety of people, from groups of people. And in other countries that are more feudal, the more feudal they are, the less rights people have to organize together financially. And I would say the U.S. Is more open than some countries and less open than some countries in terms of our rights to organize. And so, but the issue is that if you look at the field of finance, which is essentially the field of organizing capital, then there's something in common with almost every aspect of finance wherever you turn. So if you've got a brokerage account somewhere, if you're that kind of investor, or if you work with an investment banker, it's called the commission. Like a real estate broker. So there's stockbroker, real estate brokers. Brokers, they make their living on commission. And I'm not going to say it's always bad. When we get into black and white, we're in trouble. But there is a negative aspect about commission-based transactions, especially when it comes to finance. And here's the problem. Let's say that some entrepreneur wants to raise $100,000, and you're a broker and your commission is 5%. Well, you just made $5,000 if you can arrange the financing for that person. And then another person comes along and they want to raise $10 million, and your commission is still 5%. Well, 5% of $10 million is $500,000. Is that right? 50,000. No, I'm sorry. Oh, no. I'm not going to cut this. You get the point. 5% of 100,000 is 5,000, and 5% of 10 million is 500,000. So, as we're all wanting to maximize our self-interest, what's better? Of course, make $500,000. It's fundamentally not harder. If you're in the brokerage business, it's actually harder to raise small amounts of money for a lot of reasons. The amount of labor that goes into it is higher. And so what happens? So the whole field just progressively moves toward the bigger deals. There's always the competition to do the biggest deals in real estate or any other place. Once you get the knack, you want to graduate up, and it means that small transactions don't happen. It means that the startups, very hard to start because nobody wants to really help. And so you get this, and then the self-interest to me is, it creates a really inappropriate dynamic. So the broker has really neither the investor's interest or the entrepreneur's interest at heart. They have their own interest at heart because they get paid by the transaction no matter what. Whether it's a good deal for the investor, whether it's a good deal for the entrepreneur, it doesn't matter because they're just there to make the commission. That's a very, very problematic business model. So when you eliminate the commissions, at least in startup finance, then you have to come up with another way to generate revenue because there's a lot of work. You've got to pay for lawyers. You've got to market the deal. You've got to work with the entrepreneur to make sure the paperwork is all done right. There's just a lot of things that you have to do to make that work. Hi. So how do we do it at Vegan Launch? At Vegan Launch, we're using the same financial structures, but we don't get paid from the transaction. We don't make success fees, commissions. We're not brokers. And that allows us to maintain an ethical point of view. We can look at enterprises of all sizes and judge them. The community does the judging, not me. I'm not the arbiter of what's vegan or not. The community will have to decide. Is it vegan enough? Is it ecological enough? Does it help human beings enough? So instead we collect fees and membership fees or donations. Any kind of other revenue model, a revenue model that is representative of a couple different things. I mean, there's training that we're putting together, training opportunities. There's just donations to the site that we're looking at doing. If you look at, say, kiva.org is a microfinance site. They give small loans to people mostly in places where access to capital is very bad. I'm looking for the right term. I don't know, developing countries. I don't like that because where are they developing to? I don't know, but really small amounts of money. And so Kiva they don't do transaction fees either. And what they do is everybody who participates on their website, they'll get an invitation to make a donation. And it works actually pretty well. They make several $1 million a year, which is enough to run their operations that way. Now, we're kind of looking at it being sort of a Kiva on steroids, because Kiva only does this one type of transaction, a microloan, zero interest microloans. But we want to use the same basic principle of a non-commission approach, but instead of to just these microloans, which are very lightweight in terms of regulation. They're pretty easy to do transactions anywhere in the world. We want to do real financing, which involves real debt, real equity. And because that's where all the money in the world, the majority of money is sitting in investment products, investments, stock market, real estate, whatever, all those kinds of things where some broker is normally getting a piece of the action each time. And so that's our principles. We're going to use, all these different kinds of essentially non-correlated revenue streams that allow us to stay focused on the big picture commitment as opposed to trying to goose our revenue by only doing the deals that are easy or only doing the deals that make the most money for us or the one that we think will do the best. What we want to do is we want to find whoever's the most committed and who's able to step by step make progress on proofs of concept and milestones and the things that lead to success. And so we fundamentally created a non-competitive space. And if you look at all the incubators and all the vegan financing, and I'm not trying to criticize them, it's just coming from the old way. It's all finance, all incubators. They're all super competitive. Somebody said, well, why don't you go to Y Combinator? A friend of mine just said this today. Why don't I just sign up for Y Combinator? And I said, because it's harder to get into Y Combinator than it is to get into Harvard. And that's fine for this super hyper competitive thing where pretty much the agreement you make when you get in is you're either going to knock it out of the park and get a big venture round and blow up and be a unicorn, or you're going to die. It's like, okay, if we say, well, veganism, if we don't succeed today, we should quit and do something else? No. So those kind of institutions, they're just not a good fit for what we're doing. I'm not, sure, they should change if they want to. I would like everyone to follow my model. I'm not expecting that to happen, at least not yet. But if we can demonstrate a solid business model for Vegan Launch itself that allows us to be compassionate, to not pick winners and losers ourselves, and to not enrich ourselves by trying to pick winners and losers, I think you're going to see something really powerful. And so this is my frustration. Even as the securities laws have become more liberal, and what I'm calling the capitalism 3.0, and even as people can begin to communicate more publicly, there's still a competition. If you want to raise crowd-funded equity, first you have to be approved by the portal. And I'm not saying we won't have any approval. It's not a free-for-all, but anybody that's got a vegan value proposition that our members, if they can convince our members that it's worthy, you know, the vegan launch community, that's who we want to talk to directly. In the end, that's what people want to, that's, you know, you need to find your tribe. If you're an entrepreneur, you need to find your tribe. And that's what still all this commission-based stuff, it prevents you from finding your tribe. So, you know, the mega tribe is vegan investors. And then inside of the whole vegan investor community, some people are going to like one kind of business and some people are going to like other businesses. And that's how we're going to get large amounts of enterprises funded in a relatively short period of time. If you look, most of these venture capital firms, vegan or not, they only do a handful of deals a year because there's so much scrutiny, and they just, they have to pick a home run winner, and they're betting on either a big win or typically, typical venture capital firm is saying maybe 20% win, 30% maybe break even, and the rest fail. We don't want to do that. What's the point of failure? Just keep working until the commitment is satisfied. That's the way we want to work. Right, each entrepreneur comes into the space with a commitment. And sure, yeah, if they can't get any traction even at the idea level, if everyone says, like this, we don't like the idea, we're not going to fund it, okay, but at least they got to speak to their audience first before they went through some hyper-competitive process. And win-lose. It's not win-lose, but at a certain point, if you can't convince anybody your idea's got any merit, well, maybe some tweaking is involved. And we help with that too. We've had people come into our site, entrepreneurs, and they just weren't fundable. And the reason they weren't fundable, well, their business model really wasn't delivering enough value to the vegan ethic. When you get right down to it, they hadn't really structured the values properly. And that's why we give free mentoring to entrepreneurs, so they can be taught really how to succeed, because they're bringing that vegan commitment. I love everyone that comes into the site. They're amazing. And so if they come to us with that vegan commitment, we just work with them until the commitment is expressed in a way that makes sense. There's two things that you have to do to be successful as an entrepreneur. You have to, and especially raising capital. If you want to raise capital, there's two stories that you have to tell. One is the basic story about your business, what it's about, what it does, why people should care. And then there's this other story in numbers that speak to the questions of finance. And what I find is most of the entrepreneurs that come into our space need a little help with both the narrative story and the financial story. And that costs money. What kind of money does it cost? It costs money to operate the website, pay the developers, and I got to eat myself. As I said, I'm an entrepreneur myself, hardcore when you get right down to it. Anybody that's on staff. So any of our revenue generating products, whether it's a donation or there will be some premium memberships for different kinds of services, some of the things that we want to share with people in terms of finance legally can't be done unless they've paid a fee. We've got so we have pay a lot of money for technology and a lot of money for lawyers. But we're using the technology and the law in a way that is compliant with our commitment and our ethics. And to circle around back to the beginning, we're right at this moment, we're able to take out one of these destructive elements of capitalism, which is the utter reliance on commissions to lubricate the whole system. And that's one of the things that's caused things to go in this bad way, because that kind of approach just always favors the people that are already at the top of the financial pyramid, and it always disempowers the people at the bottom. So by using this model, my goal is to elevate the people at the bottom, create economic prosperity through vegan and ecological economic development. So thanks again for listening, and that wanted to share that with you. And I look forward to talking in the next video.